talk about love. Yeah, I got fears, but I ain't got no love. Yes, I got fears. Fear of plane crash. Fear of car crash. Oh, fear of sex. Fear of alcohol.
So today I want to talk about the disappearance of Molly Bish. This is a case that I've known about for a while. I mean, it happened in 2000, but it's one of those ones that stick with me. And I say that about a lot of cases, but for some reason they do. And maybe it's all of them. I'm sure it isn't, but it seems like it. But there's certain ones that really have always stuck out to me. Carrie Culberson, you know, and Molly Bish, Martha Moxley, and I don't know exactly why that is, but so I wanted to get to this one for a while. I ran that poll and Molly Bish was on it, and I wanted to get to it. So for those that don't know, Molly Bish was a 16-year-old athletic, honor roll type of individual who was working as a lifeguard, and just recently working as a lifeguard in the town of Warren, Massachusetts. I believe she had been a lifeguard only for 3 weeks. Other accounts I read said 8 days, and I'm going to get into that because, man, it's so hard. And I tell you guys this, and you some of you believe me, some of you, like, I don't know, discount it, but when you have a big case, there are a lot of facts that get missed because of inaccurate reporting, and also because of the advent of the internet and the way people can communicate, and sometimes the facts get lost. Facts such as how long she's been a lifeguard. You know, in one newspaper account, and remember, that's where I get most of my facts from when I don't have police reports or trial transcripts. In a case like this, it's not going to trial, but newspaper accounts can be wrong, and a lot of times they are. In this case, there was one newspaper article, and I try to get the newspaper article that's closest to the event and not years after. Now, I do look at the ones from years after, but I focus in on the ones the day after it happened, or day after the press gets involved, or whatever it may be. So in one case it said 3 weeks she had been working as a lifeguard at Cummings Pond, and the other is 8 days. Now it could be both. Maybe those 8 days were spaced out in those 3 weeks. But anyhow, those are the facts that I obtained. The police report would have the exact amount of time. Although the discrepancy is not that big, so it doesn't really matter for the crime scene assessment part of this. So on June 27th, 2000, she goes to work. It's the first day of swimmers, or swimmer registration, or kiddie swimmers, but it's not her first day there. She's a lifeguard. She has it's a pond. It's a man-made pond. It's very secluded. That's important. And she gets there at 9:50. Other reports say 10 o'clock. Now, is that important? Yes. In this case, when a timeline needs to be established, each minute is critical. So I don't know whether it was 9:50 or it was 10. But regardless, that is the information we have to work with. Within 30 minutes, when the first swimmers arrive, she's missing. Her chair is set up on the beach. Her whistle's there. Her shoes, more specifically, her sandals are there. So she's barefoot. She's only wearing, as far as I know, a bathing suit. There was another report to say she might have had a pair of khaki shorts on with that. Her two-way radio is there. We'll get into that in a little bit. A bottle of water and her first aid kit. What's significant about that is that it's open. Now, let's go back to Molly Bish's victimology. Is she a high-risk victim? Now, sometimes high risk and low risk doesn't really mean anything, okay? I'm always searching for that. You know, just because the way I was taught through the FBI's classification manual and the criminal profiling courses and college courses that I went through, they teach you that. But does that help you actually get to the offender? I don't think so. What it does is it just helps establish your pool of suspects. For instance, if she's a high-risk victim, meaning she lived in a bad neighborhood, she was a drug user, she hung out with shady people, she was a prostitute, things like that make you a higher risk victim. So your suspect pool is much larger. That doesn't necessarily get you any closer to the suspect. In this case, she is a low risk victim, means she came from a good family, means she got good grades, she didn't hang out with unsavory characters, she was an athlete, she had a job, responsible. All those things point to a low risk victim. But she still disappeared, right? So does it really matter whether she's a high risk or low risk? Not really. But it generalizes the pool of suspects, I believe, and it has to be done. So with her victimology being as it is, you would not expect her to be a victim of foul play. Now, anybody can be a victim of foul play, whether you're a high-risk person, such as a drug-using prostitute, or a low-risk victim, as Molly Bish and many others are. You still have to look at victimology in order to determine what would she do under given circumstances, and who or what is the pool of suspects we are looking for. Are we looking for teenage, rebellion, bad kids? Are we looking at the other end of this as an abduction from an unknown predator? Those are the things that victimology can help you with. None of these things that you look at, criminal profiling, crime scene assessment, victimology, suspectology, none of those things are going to lead you exactly to your suspect. So let's get into a bit of a timeline. And the timeline, you know, is well established that you have to focus in about 48 hours before and after the commission of the crime, or in this case, a disappearance. So it's very important that we do that, because you never know what clues can be brought out before or after the crime, obviously. So in this case, the day before is very important. Now, why? Because when Molly Bish is being dropped off at this pond to be a lifeguard, now remember, she's taking over this lifeguard position from her brother, who had been a lifeguard at that pond for 3 years. She was new to it, but she was a great swimmer. She was a softball player, I believe field hockey as well. Very athletic. 16 years old, going into her senior year. Now, when her mom drops her off the day before this disappearance, now this is very crucial, is when she pulls into the parking lot at 10 o'clock. It might have been 9:50. It seems like they were very responsible people, and it looks like her mom may have gotten her there earlier than when she was supposed to be there. That's always my motto too. And my daughter gets so tired of me saying it, but I always say it. If you're early, you're never late. I'm always early to everything I do. And it seems like maybe that was the case in this family too, because it's before the pond opens up and Mom is dropping Molly off, and she notices a car parked near her where she can observe individual in the car. It made her feel uneasy. Her thoughts are, what's he doing here? This isn't even open yet, and he's sitting there smoking a cigarette. Doesn't he have a job? Doesn't he have a place to be? I want to say that Molly's disappearance was on a Tuesday, so that would put this guy there on a Monday. It gives her an uneasy feeling. She doesn't want to leave Molly there, so she gets out of her car and goes down to the beach and hangs out with Molly for a little bit. She comes back to the car. The guy is still there. She messes around in a car, making time like she is looking for something to make it not obvious that she's not leaving, because this guy is making her feel uncomfortable. The guy finally leaves. Could it be anything? Yes. Let me tell you something. I sometimes have gone to state parks, to ponds that I am familiar with, and sat there and, you know, just relaxed. I don't care whether the place is open or not. You know, it's therapeutic, you know, to stare at the water and be there before it gets crowded. So, can I put a lot of stock into this? Not yet. But Mom noticed. Fast forward to the next day, they go through the same routine. Mom is dropping off her daughter. She does her thing. Before she takes her to Cummings Pond to begin her work, they stop at the police station, which is very ironic. And they get a two-way radio. Now, the reason for this is because cell phone coverage wasn't there. There was no, I guess there were cell phones in 2000, but not as prevalent as it is today. And there was no other communication lines there. So they used a radio. That was found at Molly's empty station. So Molly gets there. Within 30 minutes, she's gone. One of the biggest clues to me, I guess, would be the opening of her first aid kit. Now, why is that important? Could she have just been checking, because she was a responsible person, to make sure everything was there? Yes, you could say that, but she probably had that kit the day before, right? And she would have checked it then. And she knows she didn't use anything out of it, or if she did, she knows what she used. She wouldn't be checking it a second time. So why is it open? Well, my first inclination is that whoever abducted Molly, remember at the time, they don't know whether she drowned, whether they don't know whether she ran away. One of her friends had just been hit by a car the previous day and was in critical condition, and she was pretty upset about that. And her being responsible, you're not thinking of an abduction, but you're not thinking of her running away and leaving all of her stuff there either. So, I don't know. That is a clue that, in hindsight, you're going to look at. All right? The first thing that they do is they search the pond. And I watched an interview with her brother. I believe his name was John. I got choked up. Boy, did I feel his pain. His sister was missing. He taught her how to be a lifeguard. He gave her the job. He knew that she wasn't in that pond, but he jumped in there and was searching for her anyhow. And during this interview, which was given 20 years later, whatever, 10 years later maybe, he was crying. Man, I felt for him so much. And of course he didn't find her. And he knew that She wasn't there. And I went through something similar with my investigation and Dawn Miller when I found remains and I thought for sure it was her, and I held up the jawbone to my jawbone and was looking at my sergeant saying, it could fit, it could fit. When I knew it was deer bones there, but we were all convinced it was her bones because of something around the vertebrae of the neck and these things, and you try to make it fit. You try to just do anything you can to solve the case and bring closure to the family. And then Molly's brother's case, you know, to find her. He knew she wasn't in the water, that she didn't drown, but you're not thinking abduction either. You're not thinking she ran away. So they don't find her. Days, hours turn into weeks and months and then years. Okay? And then in 2003, a bathing suit is found. Now, if I look at this map here, I want to say, you see on the map on the top left, that's called Whiskey Hills Mountain area. I guess there's a sportsman club there. I'm not familiar with the area, but that's what I've come up with. And you see down in the bottom right hand corner where Cummins Pond is, and the blue line is just, you know, a map of directions of how do you get there. 5.3 miles. It could be shorter than that, it could be a little bit longer than that, but that's the general area where a bathing suit was found. It was a blue bathing suit. DNA testing confirmed that it was Molly's DNA. It was Molly's suit. Search intensifies, and they start finding bones piece by piece there, and DNA testing confirms that it's Molly's remains. Now what leads them to this area to find Molly's remains is a former state trooper, I believe, turned private investigator, was investigating maybe a connection between Molly Bish and another missing girl named Holly Peranian, who had disappeared 7 years earlier than Molly. Now the connection there, I believe, was that they were close proximity to each other. Now that's a very arbitrary thing to say, close proximity. I don't know the exact distance. I should have looked that up to see Warren, Massachusetts to where Holly Peranian went missing from, to see how close somebody says close is. But also another connection was that Molly Bish had wrote Holly Peranian's family when Molly was 10 years old and said, you know, I'm sorry for this and your loss. It was a church type of connectivity. That is a weird connection. But it's nothing that's, you know, going to lead you closer to the suspect. You know, it's not like the suspect went into Holly Peranian's family's filing cabinets and found a letter from Molly Bish that she wrote when she's 10 years old and says, you know what? Yeah, it's 7 years later. I'm going to go abduct Molly Bish because she wrote this letter to Holly's family. No. So those are one of the things that you can chalk up to coincidences. Remember in the last video I talked about coincidences and what they are. This is a coincidence. However freaky it may be, it's still a coincidence. So this former state trooper, retired state trooper, he then gets a search area into these woods at Whiskey Hills. I'm still not 100% sure why there, but an individual said, hey, I saw something up there a few months ago that kind of didn't look out of place, didn't look right, but I didn't investigate it. He said, take me there. They took him up there, and lo and behold, that's when they find Molly Bish's swimsuit. Excuse me while I take a drink. Now, there's another coincidence, right? the more I think about it. How does this cop that's investigating a different case that may be connected to Molly Bish, maybe he was investigating Molly Bish's case too, I'm not sure, but it led him to this place in the woods. Now go back to this map. Look at how many places, look at the wooded areas between Cummins Pond and Whiskey Hills. It's all woods. So how did he decide to search this one little section of woods 5 miles away? I think there was some initial look at the police officer. I think people may have thought that he had something to do with this. I mean, could I see why people think that? Sure, I guess. And I guess if that police officer stepped back and looked, he could probably see why he may have been a suspect or person of interest or whatever it is at the time, because he's like finding a needle in a haystack, right? But that doesn't mean that he's involved. I think of that a lot. You know, when I'm out like looking for the remains of Dawn Miller still. I mean, it's been what, I've been off that case for maybe 10 years now. But I still, every now and again, when I get in the area, go and look, and I think, what if I find something? And then the new state troopers and new investigators come in that don't really know me, and will I be a suspect? They'll be like, well, how did he find this? You know, I think about that stuff sometimes. But I know my integrity, and I'm sure this police officer, retired trooper, knows too. Hey, look, I'm out doing a good thing. I'm trying to help these families, and I found it. Bring what you want at me. You know, dig into my background, give me a polygraph, whatever it takes. I'm not scared. I bet that's the attitude he has, because all he's doing is trying to help. And he did, because he found the remains. Now, what about those remains can we learn from? Again, if we look at that map, I keep going back to that map. The remains are found. So we know, okay, after the remains are found, what do we know? She didn't run away. We kind of knew that from the family, from the victimology to begin with. She didn't drown. We know that. She didn't commit suicide. We know that, even though the remains are just skeletonized remains. So therefore, you cannot really determine a manner of death or cause of death. Manner of death, I mean, yeah, it's homicide. You know, it wasn't natural causes. She didn't just get bumped in the head, walked 5 miles somewhere, and die in the woods. It just certainly isn't suicide. So, you know, the only thing that it can be is homicide. But we don't know how. From the bones that are recovered, you don't find any nick wounds on the ribs. You don't find any blunt force trauma to the skull. If a skull was found, these things, that's what you would want to look for. But in sexual homicide cases, a lot of times, not all the time, the manner of death is strangulation. Again, not all the time. Sometimes it's blunt force trauma. Sometimes it's knife wounds. Sometimes even it is gunshot. Although the gunshot is to a lesser degree for sure. And is it because it's more of a personal cause, homicide? People get too caught up in that. People get too caught up in overkill. Personal cause, homicide. You can't always tell. But we do know that a lot of times they're strangled. I would believe that this would probably be the case. I said that about that Gabby Patino before her body was even found. She's dead. If you go back and watch my video, and I ain't bragging, okay, because there's a lot of stuff I get wrong. But in that particular case, I said she's dead. she'll be found more than likely strangled. So that's what we had. It's just because that's the norm. Not always, but that's the norm. But 5 miles away, those remains are found. I go back to, okay, we don't really have a crime scene, so you can't really do a crime scene assessment. But we can go back to where she was abducted from and look at that in the totality of everything. By the totality, I mean the location. The location, you have to know that that pond's there. You are not going to just stumble upon that pond. I'm fairly certain of that assessment. So that tells you something about the offender. He's familiar with that location. If he's familiar with it, more than likely, he is from that area. I'm not saying within 2 miles. It could be 30 miles, 30 minutes. Could be an hour. But he knows he's been there before. Well, that narrows your suspect pool, doesn't it? Think of 1 billion people in the world or in America. And all of a sudden, you can cut that number down to, hey, they've been to that park. They've been to that pond. That's fairly significant. Now, it still leaves you with a heck of a lot of people to go through, but you're narrowing it down from possibilities to probabilities. You haven't heard me say that in a while, right? Well, here we can use that to deduce to suspects. Now, what else can we say about that area? Well, the day before, the person in the car. Remember when I said it's not always, as it seems, that person isn't automatically a suspect. I gave the analogy of myself going to state parks before they open and just relaxing, looking at the water, looking at the beautiful landscape, whatever it is. But in this case, I feel that that is the person that's responsible for this abduction. Why do I feel that? He's there at 10 minutes before the park opens on Monday, right? Tuesday, she's missing right at 10 o'clock or maybe even 10 minutes till 10 a.m. What's that tell me? The person was there and stalking the individual. Because the offender knows what time people are there. He knows, more than likely, that Molly is getting there at 10 or 10 of. He's not coming there at, she wasn't abducted at 11 a.m. when other people were there, right? No, it was before the swimmers got there. It was the very first thing in the morning. It reduces his risk of being seen, but there's still a risk, and he's willing to accept that. Think back to the Springfield 3, when I said the offender saw 3 vehicles in the car and he wasn't deterred. Now, I believe that, but the more I thought about things the last couple of weeks since I did that video, it is possible. And I won't go to probable yet, but it is possible in the Springfield 3 that the person was already there. It's possible. But let's backtrack and go back to 3 cars and he wasn't deterred. That's the same thing in this case. Although he's minimizing his risks of being seen, there's still a risk. What if those swimmers got there early? What if the beach goers got there a little early? He knew this. He knew this. Now, what's intriguing to me, and it reminds me of Delphi, is that there's a cemetery that's located within walking distance from this pond. And there's a trail that goes from the cemetery to that. Is it possible that the offender parked at that cemetery and used the trail to come in to abduct Molly? Because why? Because the day previous, he was spotted by the mom in the parking lot. So, and now he is a little spooked, but he's not deterred. You know what? I'm familiar with the area. I know that there's a cemetery there, and I know there's a trail there. So, I'll use a weapon, I'll abduct her, and take her to wherever I need her to go. My car does not have to be close to abduct her. Simple as that. Now let's get back to the first aid kit. The first aid kit in particular being open. Again, is she going through it, doing inventory? Is that part of her normal routine? I'm going to say no. Who would know that? Well, victimology would tell you that, because you would interview her boss. You would interview her brother and ask the brother, hey, was that part of your duty every day to check your inventory of your first aid? Maybe it was. But maybe there was a ruse. I think of Ted Bundy with his arm in that sling, and how effective that was to gain compliance and to get these females to trust you, that to make themselves vulnerable to you. That's what it seems to me. You know, that's what's likely. That's what's probable to me. He comes down there and says, hey, do you have a Band-Aid? I cut my arm. Sure. And when she turns her back, he grabs his gun, puts it to her. There was one witness that I read in a newspaper article that said she heard a scream. Could that have been Molly? We'll never know, unfortunately. A lot of suspects in this case that I've seen through the years. Mom made a great sketch of the person that she saw in that car. I think Mom was right. And I think maybe if Mom wouldn't have been there the day previous, Molly would have been abducted that day instead of the following day. The sketch reminds me of the Zodiac Sketch. Not in appearance, but how it can fit so many people. Okay? Here's a picture it makes me think of. I hold up the picture of Zodiac to my partner, Sal, on the hunt for the Zodiac Killer on the History Channel, because I said, oh, we were sitting at the table and I was like, oh, and Sal was across from me. I'm like, I see the Zodiac right now. And I gave him that sketch to hold up and it looked like him. My point being is, sketches, I mean, yes, they're helpful, but man, they can look like so many other people. But in this case, I think it is more probable than not that that sketch is definitely of the suspect. What can we say about the suspect? I think there's a profile out there, and I did not read it, but in an interview I heard a police official give some information about the profile. And the first couple things, white male, 18 to 50, I think, was familiar with the area, and was a hunter or fisherman. Now let me talk about that. I don't know who gave that profile, okay? So I'm not going to put any credence into it. There is only a select few that I know that I will listen to their profiles. Because I've seen profiles horribly wrong. And I've seen some good ones. So I don't know who gave this one. But of those first four things that I mentioned, I can comment on. 18 to 50 years old. Sure, I mean, that's a broad range, right? You get over in that, they're going to have a hard time maybe controlling the suspect, although a gun will do a very good job at controlling a suspect, whether you're 80 years old or you're 25. But that 18 to 50, you're basically saying it wasn't a juvenile, and I will agree with that. That would rule out Molly's boyfriend at the time, who had a cut on him. His lip was cut. He had give different accounts of what happened. One said he ran into his bedroom wall and it split it open. But he was given a polygraph. He passed. Listen, and he didn't cooperate, supposedly. Yes, that raises a lot of red flags to me. But to me, this was not a juvenile offense. So we could rule that out. So the 18 to 50 I would agree with. The second thing being a white male. Statistically, I would agree with that. You have to look at the population and the ethnicity of that area. You can't rule out a Hispanic male or black male, but again, statistically, it's like 18 to 57. Yes, I'll say in this case it was a white male, especially if you go by the sketch. But I'm not going that for criminal profiling purposes. The third thing being familiar with the area. Absolutely. That's the one thing that I'll agree on 1,000%. The fourth thing I have a problem with, that he's a hunter or a fisherman. I don't think you can state that. And again, the reason why is I go to a lot of state parks and I see a lot of people that are there that aren't hunters, that are not fishermen. I don't know how you can make that statement in a criminal profile. I guess you can if you say more than likely. Yeah, maybe. I'm not beating the person up that did this criminal profile. I would just say that I don't think I would have included that. Instead, I would say is a frequent visitor to state parks or something like that. Or maybe leave that out altogether. The reason I would put that in there and not say hunter or fisherman, because of where her remains were found. It's another wooded area. It doesn't mean he's a hunter, okay? I'm not a hunter, but I go into the woods a lot, and I know a lot of people like that. So I don't think that you could say he's a hunter or a fisherman. Let me go through my notes here, because I know there's some things that I wrote down that I want to get to. The first thing I have up here is, what can we learn from this? Well, the first thing I think certainly is never give up. I think wholeheartedly this case will be solved. I don't feel like that about a lot of cases, but I do this one. I think the effort that the Massachusetts State Police put into this was tremendous. It makes me think of Teresa Corley's case, where maybe the state police didn't do as much as they should. And why the contradiction? Certainly I think that the contradiction could be because you know, Molly Bish's dad was a probation officer. Teresa Corley's family, you know, maybe didn't have that connection with law enforcement. Maybe because Teresa Corley was out drinking that night and partying, and maybe that connotated a different response than somebody that's just going to work at 10 in the morning. Whatever it is, it was certainly different responses. Now, you can't hold an organization in general and an overall responsible and start saying, well, I don't like the Massachusetts State Police because of this. Everything is individually driven. And let me give you a perfect example of that. I worked a missing person turned homicide case of a 12-year-old girl. She might have been 10. And the state police got wind of that. And this is why I was a county detective working in the district attorney's office. And they came and they got all fired up about it because the newspaper ran a story that I was working on the case. And it was one of like 3 or 4 that I was working at at the same time. I didn't seek out the newspaper. You know, they called me and asked me about cool cases and said, hey, which ones are you working on right now? And I told them. And the one happened to be a state police case. But they weren't actively working it. And of course, they didn't come to me. And I had a great relationship with them before this. They went to the district attorney, who in turn, you know, talked to me about it. He very respectful. Eric Linhart was a great district attorney. And I catch myself sometimes saying, man, I do not like the Pennsylvania State Police because of this one way that I was treated. But then I step back and look at it and say, you know what? It's not the state police as a whole. I worked with some great state troopers, especially undercover narcotics. You know, that's what I did for 8 years. I was undercover with the FBI and with working with the state police, with the DEA. So Russ Bircher was a great trooper whom I had much respect and great friend. He was a trooper. Lance Thomas worked with both Russ and Lance at the FBI. They were assigned there the same time I was. Lance is a Marine. Great. I would do anything for. Brett Herbst, another state trooper. Dave Burns, who I worked with at the district attorney's office and when I was undercover. So, I mean, I can't say all state troopers I don't like. And I catch myself sometimes doing that. There's some great troopers out there. So I'm just reiterating that because the Massachusetts State Police had one way of responding with the biggest manhunt, biggest search party in the Massachusetts State Police history for Molly Bish, and they didn't do the same for Teresa Corley. Teresa Corley was 1978, I believe. Molly Bish, 2000. Things change. So you can't just say in a broad term. It's individuals that work in those positions. So that's, again, was that me digressing? Yeah, a little bit, but it's still related a little bit to this case. Back to the notes. Timeline. Okay. Back to how you have to get the police reports, because that's where facts lie. Facts lie. That's where facts are. If I say facts lie, that's an oxymoron. Kind of like jumbo shrimp, right? So, bad word choice by me. That's where the facts are. Big discrepancy in 2 newspaper articles that I read, both in June of 2000 when this happened. Correction. In 2003 when the remains were recovered. An individual, and I want to say his name was Conti, and I'm not sure who that is, someone within the investigative realm, stated that the remains of Molly Bish were buried in a shallow grave. So I wrote down here in my notes, buried, and I have a circle around it with 2 exclamation points and 2 stars, because that's significant to me. If a body is buried versus dumped, it tells you something about the offender. It tells you whether they're, and I have down here, he is more familiar with that area where he dumped the body, buried the body, than he was where he abducted her. But then in another newspaper article from the same newspaper, it says Conti like strongly states Molly Bish was not buried. 2 quotes from the same individual. Very different. It's like, it's almost as if That is something that they wanted to hold back, maybe. That's how I took that. As maybe they put this out that she was found buried, and then the investigators were like, oh, we got to hold that back. Now why? Well, because if they get an offender who confesses and he says, yeah, I was driving along Whiskey Hill and I dumped her out the door and just kept going. Well, then you know it's a false confession because the body was buried. In this case, I don't know. I don't know whether she was buried or she was dumped because it says two different things. So I can't comment on that. I can't give an assessment of whether he was more familiar with that Whiskey Run area than he was Cummings Pond now or not. I don't know. Polygraph. They polygraphed all the sex offenders in that area, and it's quite a bit. I would encourage all of you to get on your, in Pennsylvania, it's called the Megan's Law website that the Pennsylvania State Police run. Type in your address and see how many sex offenders live near you. You'll be shocked. And it's good to know, especially if you have kids. It's good to know whether your next door neighbor 2 houses down is a violent, classified as a violent sexual predator, right? We all want to know that. Keep our kids safe. First thing I do before I even purchase a property, a house, I want to know. But in this case, they polygraphed all the sex offenders, and according to investigators, 11 failed. Again, that is why I do not rely on polygraphs. They're a good tool. Again, I say it for post and pre-test questions. That's it. The results, you could throw them out the window. 11 of them failed. Have down here the Hawley Perinian case 7 years earlier, possible connection. We talked about that trooper. That trooper seemed to me like people didn't take him seriously or something. That bothered me a little bit. It seems like anybody that goes out of their way and they're interested in this, other law enforcement will shun them. You know what I mean? Like, if let's just say a respected trooper, police officer, detective retires and they go into private practice as a private investigator and a family hires him. He once had access to everything and now he has access to nothing, and they kind of shun him. Maybe I'm speaking from experience. Maybe not. Maybe other people will have experienced this. Maybe I've observed other people going through this. And that kind of is what it seemed to me with this trooper. Maybe not. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. But I would say to that trooper, if he's watching, this former trooper who discovered the connection between Hawley and Molly and discovered the bathing suit, if that's the way that you're being treated and you need somebody, just like Viper said to Maverick in Top Gun after Goose died, give me a call. I'll fly with you. That's how I feel. I'll work with you. Give me a call. 5 miles from the beach, the body being recovered. What does that tell you? It tells me that he took Molly. No, make no mistake about this. This is a sexual assault. Okay? This isn't... Remember why people murder? Sex, jealousy, revenge, greed. You put money. I mean, there's a lot of things that fall under those main categories, but those are the main categories. Molly Bish wasn't any of that. She was an innocent victim. Innocent victim. This was a sexual assault. So this person took her to a place where he was familiar, and he sexually assaulted her and killed her. That was 5 miles away. Now, why not 100 miles away? Well, you have to control that person, number one. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do it with a weapon. But one of the things that I read that I find very intriguing is what Molly's sister said in a newspaper article. That hopefully that one day this case would be solved through DNA. And when I searched that further, because I'm thinking, what kind of DNA could they have gotten from the remains? None. It's just skeletonized. You're not getting a suspect's DNA on any remains. The bathing suit, yes, that's possible. But from what I saw, they only got Molly Bish's DNA from the bathing suit. So what else is there? There was no evidence. Well, the more I dug, the more I saw that, and I don't know whether this is common knowledge, because it's the first time I saw it. Holly's sister said cigarette butts, which I'm not too shocked about. Well, she said duct tape. Now that bothers me. Was this duct tape found? I mean, obviously it was found, but was it found like secured to remains like Kaylee Anthony? Or is it just found in the woods next to the remains? Remember, the remains are scattered. And the reason they're scattered is animal activity, scattering the bones. That DNA from a duct tape, if it's obtained, is very crucial. Very crucial. But I've not seen that anywhere else mentioning the duct tape. The 48 hours, 24 or 48 hours before and after a disappearance, how crucial that is. That's very true. You hear that a lot. But I'm not one into stereotypes or, generalizations. Yes, that's a general statement. But sometimes it has nothing to do with the crime. Right? Sometimes crimes are opportunistic. Meaning, it just happens. Let's say I am a serial killer, and I'm sitting here taping this video, and I decide, you know what, it's a nice day out, I'm gonna go murder somebody. And I start out my door, and there's a person right there who's just happened to go for a walk, never walked by my house before, and I act. You get into her 24 hours before or 48 hours before, you're not going to find anything. Nothing that relates her to me, right? Or to the offender. So that's why I got a problem with generalization. Victimology, being an athlete, honor roll, played soccer, softball, field hockey. The isolation of Cummings Pond. I have down here 11:44 a.m. was when they called the police. That call came from the two-way radio from her boss, who was a suspect at some point in time because his fingerprints were found inside her first aid kit. And he also had an interaction that morning with Molly's brother at a convenience store and didn't tell, or a hardware store, and didn't tell the brother that Molly was missing. But that's chalked up to them just not thinking that, it was a big deal, that she was abducted. I don't know much more about the boss, but I think you could certainly almost eliminate him. Again, it's a stranger abduction. And more than likely, it's that person that was in that car the day before. First aid kit open, a ruse. I have down here Ted Bundy. Not that Ted Bundy did this, just that a ruse works. I think that's about all I want to cover on this case. A lot of suspects I've seen in this case. A lot of suspects that match the sketch that the mom gave. Sometimes those mom intuitions, they know. Molly's mom knew. And I'm sure she still beats herself up every night. Because let me tell you something that happens with the loss of a child. You are full of regret. You will beat yourself up every day, thinking you should have done something different. I guarantee that's what Molly's mom does. But she has to know it's not her fault. Even though she will probably never believe that. Because I don't believe it. You know, in my experience. But it still has to be said. So if Molly's mom, or brother, or father, or sister are watching this, I would tell them it's not your fault. You can't beat yourself up. There are just evil people in this world. And all the self-medicating, all the depression, all the days of beating yourself up saying you could have done something differently, they're wasted days. That's what I have to say about that. This case means a lot to me. Okay? For some reason, it really does. I don't know who did this. There, like I said, a lot of suspects. There was different names. There was a Stanger was a name. He had killed his girlfriend, I think, and then gave some incriminating remarks, and he eventually died, but he looked like the sketch. There's another guy that this trooper, retired trooper who found the bathing suit, he connected to both cases. He died as well. There's a new individual who recently died, and they got DNA from his son, who was also in prison for a robbery, who worked at an auto mechanics shop, and he had a white car that matched what Molly's mom had saw. A lot of suspects. I don't know which one because I didn't dive into all their background, but I guarantee the police did. And isn't it funny how taking that pool of 1 billion suspects down to, let's say, a few thousand, down to 100, let's say even down to now 4 suspects. It might be one of those 4, but it might not be. But how all 4 suspects all have something that connects them to the case. That's how all cases are. And that's how innocent people get drug in, right? All 4 of these suspects didn't do this crime. Maybe one of them did. So you have 3 innocent people whose names, unfortunately and unfairly, are drug into this, plastered all over social media, newspapers, identifying them of person of interest or a suspect in a disappearance. And they had nothing to do with it. That's sad. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. But hey, that's the world we live in today. I may not like it. I often tell my family, listen, outside that window, yes, it's 2022. It's glorious. But in this house, it's 1956. We're listening to Buddy Holly, and Elvis Presley. Hey, I'm going to leave it on a good note, thinking about Buddy Holly. That'll be the day. Mains out.